Shout out to Christine Brennan. Team USA, y'all need to stop playing. Hold on, wait a second. Y'all will recognize and appreciate Caitlyn Clark as the face of this whole get-up. Nobody's checking for these other, no disrespect. Great basketball players. That don't mean people checking for you. You mean to tell me y'all put other people's face all on the Team USA stuff and y'all left Caitlyn Clark off of it?
That's not just disappointment. That's genuine disbelief, because USA Basketball just released promotional materials for their December training camp, and somehow the biggest name in women's basketball is nowhere to be found on the graphic. Not hidden in the background. Not in small print, completely absent. We're talking about a player who single-handedly drove WNBA viewership up by 400% during her rookie season. A player whose jersey outsold every other athlete in women's sports combined. And USA Basketball decided to feature Jackie Young-Kelsey Plum and Kaylee Copper on their training camp promotional graphic. Instead, Christine Brennan, who's covered Olympic basketball since 1984, broke this story at midnight on a Friday. And her reaction tells you everything about how she can see.
Wanted to go all out promoting women's basketball, bring new fans in, and get unprecedented attention for a team that dropped in TV viewership at the Paris Olympics. That's right, the women's USA viewership dropped at the Olympics in Paris. Nobody was watching it. They would have added the photo of one of the player to this graphic, but no. She continued.
Here's the context that makes this even worse. The Paris Olympics women's basketball team saw a massive drop in viewership compared to previous years. Brennan reported that TV ratings fell significantly because casual fans had no compelling reason to tune in. The hardcore basketball audience showed up. But the broader sports audience that drives advertising revenue and media attention, they stayed away. Now contrast that with what happened during Caitlyn Clark's rookie WNBA season. Indiana Fever games averaged 1.2 million viewers on cable networks' games. She played in drew crowds that hadn't been seen in women's basketball in over 2 decades.
Matter.
Yeah, well, I've given it, as you know, over the last 60 hours. I broke the news right around midnight, Friday to Saturday morning. And I think on both fronts, merit and publicity, you, of course, mentioned it, you know, it's just a total swing and a miss by the national governing body, by USA Basketball, just a missed opportunity. And but I'll start with my answer by saying, I have covered this women.
Arenas that typically sat half empty were selling out weeks in advance. USA Basketball had the blueprint right in front of them. They watched the entire WNBA season unfold. They saw the numbers. They saw the merchandise sales. They saw international media outlets sending reporters specifically to cover one player, and their response to all that data was to leave her off the promotional graphic entirely on this subject matter. Yeah, well, I've given it over the last 60 hours. Now listen carefully to what Brennan says about covering these gold medal games. She describes standing in the press tribune, that's the designated media area at Olympic venues, and using the word tumbleweeds to describe the attendance at a gold medal game for the most dominant team in Olympic basketball history.
Clark on that team, the team that so richly deserves attention and doesn't get it and won't get it without her, because there's just so much going on in an Olympics. On that same day, there probably will be 30 other gold medals given out, and sports editors and others have to make a decision. Do you go to Simone Biles? Do you go to women's soccer? Where do you go? It's not, you know, there's just too much going on. You put Caitlyn Clark on that team, and every single one of those guys that can't stand women's.
The U.S. women's basketball team hasn't lost at the Olympics since 1992. They've won 7 consecutive gold medals. They're arguably the most successful team in any Olympic sport. Men's or women's, and journalists who cover basketball for a living are choosing to skip their games because the audience isn't there to justify the coverage. Bob Ryan, one of the most respected basketball writers in America, had conversations with Brennan at the 2012 London Olympics about this exact problem. That was 12 years ago. The issue isn't new. What's new is that women's basketball finally had a solution dropped into their lap, and USA Basketball is actively choosing not to use it. She's stating a fact that most people in sports media won't say out loud. There are journalists who will cover the men's Olympic basketball team, but refuse to cover the women's team. Even when both teams are competing at the same venue.
1992, Rich, the men's team, how that grew basketball around the world, especially for boys and men, and where it reached Africa. Well, the opportunity with Caitlyn Clark's popularity, Africa, Europe, Asia. Think of how many number 22 USA jerseys would have been sold. Money that could have then been pumped back in to help have developmental programs in the.
That's not a scheduling conflict. That's a deliberate choice based on perceived audience interest. Those journalists make coverage decisions based on what their editors will publish and what their readers will click on. When they skip women's basketball, they're telling you that their audience doesn't care, except that calculation completely changed during the 2024 WNBA season. Suddenly, those same journalists who wouldn't touch women's basketball were scrambling to get credentials for Indiana Fever games. International media outlets were sending correspondents to cover a rookie point guard in Indianapolis. Brennan mentions a British journalist at the Masters golf tournament who specifically told her he was planning to cover Caitlyn Clark at the Olympics. The demand was there. The international interest was there. The media infrastructure was ready, and USA Basketball left her off the Olympic roster entirely, citing the need to reward veterans and maintain team chemistry. She's drawing the direct comparison to the 1992 Dream Team. That's not hyperbole.
See what I'm saying? Christine Brennan gets it. Brennan gets it. Regardless how you feel about her, she's been on this stuff from the beginning. Caitlyn Clark got disrespected by Team USA when they had her coming off the bench when she was, 17? Y'all had her coming off the bench behind Haley Van Lith. Like, what are y'all talking about?
That's the actual parallel. The original Dream Team, with Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and Larry Bird, didn't just win a gold medal. They fundamentally changed how the world viewed basketball. Kids in Africa, Europe, and Asia started playing basketball. Because they watched that team, the NBA's international expansion over the past 30 years traces directly back to the global exposure. The Dream Team generated the league, now has players from 40 different countries. International broadcasting rights generate billions in revenue. All of that started with putting the biggest stars on the Olympic stage. Brennan is arguing that Caitlyn Clark represented the same opportunity for women's basketball. Not just in the United States, but globally, number 22 USA jerseys
By Team USA when they had her coming off the bench when she was, 17? Y'all had her coming off the bench behind Haley Van Lith. Like, what are y'all talking about? This stuff has been going on far too long. Team USA, y'all need to get it together. Respect the woman with the throne. Get down in the comments. Let me know what you think about this.
in countries without established women's leagues would have had someone to watch and emulate. The financial implications alone are staggering. USA Basketball could have pumped that merchandise revenue back into developmental programs. They could have used the increased media rights fees to fund youth basketball initiatives internationally. Instead, they made a decision that prioritized short-term team chemistry over long-term growth. Here's what makes Brennan's credibility important. She's not a social media personality looking for clicks. She's not a new reporter trying to make a name by generating controversy. She's covered every Olympics since 1984, written for major newspapers, and has sources throughout USA Basketball's organizational structure when she says she's seen the lack of interest firsthand. She means she's physically stood in empty press sections at gold medal games for 4 decades, when she says her next interview is with a New Zealand radio show. She's demonstrating that international media is actively seeking coverage of this story. That's not normal for a promotional graphic controversy. That's international media recognizing that USA Basketball made a decision with global implications. And notice the timeline here. The December 12th training camp hasn't even happened yet. This is just the promotional material for a practice session, and it's already generating international media coverage that should tell USA Basketball something about the magnitude of their... Now we get to the historical pattern that makes this particularly frustrating. This isn't the first time USA Basketball has mishandled Caitlyn Clark when she was 17 years old, playing for USA Basketball's youth teams. They had her coming off the bench, not starting coming off the bench, while Hailey Van Lith was getting starting minutes. Let that sink in for a moment. The player who would go on to break Pete Muravich's all-time NCAA scoring record, an error that stood for 54 years, was being brought off the bench for a youth national team. The player who would eventually generate more media attention than any women's basketball player in history wasn't considered good enough to start for a junior team. That's not hindsight, bias. Caitlyn Clark was already showing elite skills at 7. She was already demonstrating court vision and shooting range that separated her from her peers, and USA Basketball's evaluation system somehow concluded she should be a reserve player. So here's what this promotional graphic controversy actually reveals. It's not just a marketing mistake. It's a continuation of a pattern where USA Basketball consistently undervalues the player who's done more to grow women's basketball than anyone in the past 20 years. Think about what USA Basketball's mission statement actually says. They exist to win medals, yes, but also to grow the sport. That's explicitly part of their organizational mandate. Growing the sport means expanding the audience, increasing participation, generating media interest, and creating financial sustainability by every single one of those metrics. Caitlyn Clark is the most valuable asset women's basketball. Has she expanded the audience? By bringing in millions of casual sports fans who had never watched a WNBA game, she increased participation by inspiring young girls to pick up a basketball. She generated unprecedented media interest from outlets that traditionally ignore women's sport, and she created financial sustainability. By proving that women's basketball can be profitable when marketed correctly, USA Basketball watched all of that happen in real time. During the 2024 season, they had a front-row seat to the transformation of their sports commercial viability. And when it came time to promote their December training camp, they made a graphic that featured returning Olympians from a team that generated disappointing viewership numbers. That's not just tone-deaf. That's organizational dysfunction. That's a governing body that doesn't understand its own product or its own audience. The WNBA just negotiated a new CBA that dramatically increased player salaries, and benefit that negotiation happened in an environment where the league could point to surging attendance, rising viewership, and increased sponsor interest. All of those improvements were driven primarily by the attention Caitlyn Clark generated players throughout the league, benefited financially from her impact. Whether they want to acknowledge it or not, the new CBA doesn't happen without the leverage that comes from demonstrable audience growth. And that audience growth doesn't happen without the player who made women's basketball appointment viewing for millions of fans. Now, USA Basketball is preparing for the 26 World Cup and the 2020. Those are massive opportunities to build on the momentum from the 2024 WNBA season. Los Angeles will have hometown crowds, primetime television slots, and international media attention that dwarfs what Paris received.